Welcome back to Firefighting in Canada's virtual summit. Our third live session, Mental Health Leading the Way Forward, is about to start. Please welcome Lieutenant Braden Osborne from the Dashwood Volunteer Fire Department on Vancouver Island. A few years back, Braden took a course on resiliency on the front lines that kickstarted his passion for mental health in the fire service and led to the development of the Dashwood Mental Resilience booklet, details of which he will share with you today. Remember, there will be a question period at the end, and you can type your questions into your user interface anytime, and we will answer them then. We will begin Braden's presentation after a short word from our sponsor, Plymovent, Clean Air at Work.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much, Laura, for that little introduction. And thank you all for tuning in today. It's a bit of a different format than I'm used to, especially in the fire service with a webinar and talking into this camera to you guys. But I'm excited to see how this goes. I first want to thank Firefighting in Canada for hosting today's summit and having me on to speak about mental health and the Dashwood Mental Resilience booklet, which we developed in the last couple of years. Just because of the way this webinar software works, I won't be flipping my own slides, so you'll hear next slide as I go through, just a heads up. So yeah, we'll go with the next slide to start right off. There we go. So a little bit about me, my background, I've been with the Dashwood Volunteer Fire Department for about 5 years this August, and I joined while I was attending university for my Bachelor of Business Administration, which I completed in 2018. I've been a lieutenant with Dashwood for just over a year. I'm a member of our OHS committee and I chair the subcommittee on mental health. After attending a workshop a few years ago, I had this light bulb moment where I realized there was a need and an opportunity in the fire service to kind of expand our mental health supports. Since that time, I've been pretty dedicated to creating some positive change and helping our members in Dashwood and hopefully beyond. For the last 3 years, my day job has been in construction as a carpenter, and I recently started a small company called First Do Consulting. So we can go to the next slide. A bit about what we're going to be talking about. First off, why mental health is so important right now. I know we hear a lot of buzzwords about it, but why is it important in the fire service? As well as the booklet. What is the booklet? How it started, what's inside? Third off is how do we develop a culture of trust and change that stigma around mental health that's in a lot of departments and in the fire service as a whole. Lastly, there's a few different tools that I want to share with you guys, talking about developing a mental wellness toolbox, kind of like we have a toolbox for the rest of our skills in the fire service. What kind of toolbox do we have for our mental health? We can go to the next slide. So some data, important things here. 68 first responders in Canada took their own lives in 2016, and almost half of firefighters are exhibiting symptoms consistent with one or more mental disorders. It's pretty significant. In Canada, first responders get PTSD two times as much as the general population. I actually believe it's actually higher than that. In my opinion, I think a lot of firefighters aren't getting the help they need, and they aren't getting those PTSD diagnoses. In the States, it's actually almost 5 times as much as the general population. Some data like this, it really demonstrates how important mental health is in the fire service and in the first responder community in general. We can go to the next slide. Before I tell you how it started, I want to start off with what is the Dashwood Mental Resilience booklet. There's the title or the cover page on your screen there. But what's inside? It's kind of basically our core one-stop shop for everything mental health related in Dashwood, our cornerstone, so to speak. It wasn't supposed to start out that way, but it's really kind of brought everything together in one place, which is really great. Its focus is on supporting our members and their families. It holds a wealth of clinically sound information, both public resources and department-only resources for members who may be struggling at home. They might be struggling with work or fire department stressors. So this booklet is really there for them. The next slide we can go to. So where did it start? Something like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. Unfortunately, I wish it did. But hundreds of hours have gone into this booklet. At the beginning, it was not supposed to be this elaborate or this complex. It started back in 2018 when I attended a workshop called Building Resiliency on the Front Lines. It was hosted by Dr. Tim Black, whose picture's up there, at the University of Victoria. In attendance were first responders, frontline workers like nurses. About halfway through this presentation, that light bulb moment, I was like, hold up, wait, what's going on here? There's all these things that I was learning that for the first time, I hadn't learned it in secondary school, post-secondary school. It hadn't been part of my firefighter training. And thinking back, it wasn't in my IFSTA book. If you actually look through your IFSTA manual, there's maybe 10 pages that mention mental health very briefly. In that moment, that light bulb moment, I saw this gap, and a gap that could be fixed in training. I thought what a great idea it would be to make a brochure, like just something that we could hand out to our members so they could have some resources and some information about this stuff. If we go to the next slide, the winding road of how we went from that brochure to what it is now. Obviously, very quickly, I realized that that brochure was not going to be enough. There wasn't going to be enough space on the brochure, and we needed to go more in depth into mental health as a whole, especially within how it relates to our department and the resources. So right after realizing that this brochure wasn't going to be enough, I realized that there's a ton of information out there, and sorting through it is going to be a real struggle. So I brought this to the OHS committee, and in turn we formed a subcommittee on mental health, where we kind of work to both improve department resources, our policies, kind of update things and look at what some best practices were, but also to sift through some information so we could collate it and put it into this booklet, which was a monumental task, really, with how much was out there. We weren't reinventing the wheel, but we had to find all different types of wheel to make the kind of wheel that we wanted, I guess. If we go to the next slide, kind of tying it all together, once we had all this information, taking out what's kind of repetitive, making it so that it's easy to read. There's a ton of clinical jargon when it comes to trauma and talking about mental health. And if it read like a textbook and was like a textbook, no one was going to read it. This was something that kept coming back to me, as we don't want to scare people away with scary language or language that's confusing. It has to read easy, kind of like a novel or something like that. So Dr. Tim Black and Dr. Lee Blaney were extremely helpful with ensuring the clinical accuracy and vetting of the booklet after we changed a lot of the language in it. The graphic designer and I actually had this joke going on from the end, where every edit was the last edit, and I'm pretty sure over from January till March, I must have sent him 50 emails with, oh, this is going to be the last edit, or maybe one more edit after this. So Mo, our graphic designer, was amazing with that. So thank you, Mo, and thanks for your patience. Sorry. On the next slide, we can go to, there it is. Thanking the contributors, like Mo, who's up there. A ton of people went into this project. It wasn't just me. I was lucky enough to have that initial idea and follow it through, but there were so many amazing people along the way, and a ton of people that aren't up on this list. One of those people was a training officer from the South Island who I'd met at a incident safety officer course a little while earlier. I had mentioned that I was working on this book with mental health, and he was pretty excited about it. He was like, oh man, I want to hear more. So if we go to the next slide. There it is. He wanted to hear more about it, so we set up a meeting. I go over, I meet him, and we talked about what his initial thoughts were on the booklet. He was pretty excited about it, and I left him a copy, just I think it might have been black and white, and just on regular paper, and said, read through it, let me know what you think, and get back to me. A couple days later, probably 4 days later, he calls me up and is like, you won't believe what just happened. And he shares this story. A member of his had come into his office. This member was someone who had never really seemed to be bothered by tough calls. He hadn't been to see a counselor before. He'd never really wanted to. But this firefighter comes into the TO's office and is like, I don't know what's going on. I haven't been sleeping. I'm feeling strung out. I don't know what to do. Like, help, basically. The TO shuts the door and starts going, well, okay, well, what are you feeling? How can we help you? And then realizes, oh, I still have this booklet on my desk. So he pulls out the booklet that I gave him, the draft copy, and starts going through it a little bit. And inside, two of the things on this on the slide that you can see there are the PTSD checklist and the perceived stress scale. So two self-evaluations that members can do. And so this training officer did these two different self-evaluations with this member. This member scored really high, like almost at the top of both of them, and to him was like, whoa, it is like something is wrong, like something's not working, I'm not processing something right. I really do need help. And so with that, the training officer, luckily that department has an employee assistance program, an EAP. And so the training officer was able to forward this member to their EAP, and where he was able to get counseling for no cost to him, and walk out of that room feeling like he had a path to get out of this really tough feeling. So now, like the story, obviously, when this training officer tells me, I'm so excited, like, holy smokes, this booklet works. It's not even published. I haven't even printed it on proper paper, and it's working. So it really reinforced its importance and how it could really be a difference maker in a lot of different organizations, which was a pretty exciting feeling. If we go to the next slide. What's inside? So after hearing that story, going, wow, like he was able to use those self-evaluation tools, it really made me hone in on a few different aspects of it and tidy some of them up. The first one is we go like right as you open the cover, it's about crisis. If you're in crisis right now, what do you do? Full stop, that's what that page is. There's a blank one and then just that. And that basically gives the member, if they're really struggling, they're at a breaking point, they have a crisis line, they have the local walk-in clinics where you can get crisis counseling, all right at their fingertips immediately. So they're not searching, they're not in a panic trying to find something, they can feel supported immediately. For those who aren't in crisis, who are just kind of trying to learn more or looking for some help, it starts off talking about what is trauma, what are these things that we're experiencing regarding these traumatic incidents, what's the normal reactions. Another great one inside is from the Canadian Mental Health Association, is how to check in. You can see a little bit of it on the left there. And when should we be checking in on others, and what's the process that we should be checking in with others? It goes also into some not self-evaluation tools, some support that we offer. We have a ton of great resources in Dashwood. Our chief, Nick Akiavati, has been so on it with being progressive, with adding new things, asking us, would we like this? How would we like this? Do we want more of a certain benefit? And because of that, we have this great coverage for all of our members. So making sure that that's communicated with this booklet. And then outside of that, we have all of our regional walk-in resources, telephone resources, online resources, applications that people can use at home, ways to really just support our membership with this booklet and with the programs that we're trying to convey. The booklet is amazing in so many ways, but it's not a silver bullet. It's a big part of what our mental health program is now, and it could be for anyone's department. But without working on stigma around mental health and trying to change that culture, it's just another book that has resources. But if people aren't going to it and comfortable asking for it and looking for the resources, it's not going to get the same kind of, it's not going to be as effective. And on the next slide here, we talk about that stigma around mental health. The picture on the right is from the BC First Responders Mental Health website. They've done a few different kind of campaigns about share it, don't wear it, and it's not weak to speak up kind of thing, which has been really good for changing that stigma and making it so we're not thinking of it as like a shameful thing to ask for help. But in regards to removing the stigma around mental health, like I was saying in the story with the training officer, that TO had developed that environment. He had that relationship where that member, the firefighter, was able to come into the office, approach him with a really tough subject, kind of go, help, like, I don't know what to do. And the TO was prepared. He was ready to listen and engaging in a challenging topic to talk about. So that relationship of trust is really important. Without trust, reaching out for help, it's extremely difficult. It can be pretty much impossible for a lot of people to take that step, that next step, and ask for help without having some trust there, until it reaches a critical point. Often, if someone's at the point of a breakdown or in a crisis, that's when they just Hail Mary and are trying to ask for help, but sometimes that's too late. Another aspect of reducing that stigma is training. Training on mental health is especially important. All of our firefighters must be on the same page. When we're on the same page, when we all understand mental health equally, it's not scary. It's not like this unknown. When we all are kind of in the same boat, so to speak, we can talk about it, and it goes a long way to normalizing that stigma. Familiarity really breaks down resistance. And so education and training is big for that. Everyone can be a leader in mental health. So leading by example, reaching out for help does not know rank or seniority. A captain with 20 years, they may find themselves reaching out to a firefighter of a couple years, just because that firefighter maybe was passionate, approachable, and trusted regarding mental health. I personally have experienced this, and if we can normalize mental health, we can be more inclusive and aware of each other's stories. Like on a fire ground, we're stronger together, and if we approach mental health together, we're going to be far more effective in changing that culture and the stigma and supporting our membership. At the bottom here, I talk about a little bit of cancer prevention as like an example for the cultural shift. That was a huge cultural shift. In the last 5 years since I've been in the service, there's been almost a 180 in how we decon after fires. It's been data driven. In our operations, we see changing decon procedures at the fire, back at the hall, exhaust extraction. Unfortunately, like, mental health is not as easy to see as dirty gear. So it's a little bit different, but it's no less important. I'm really hoping that we can see similar cultural changes in mental health with the increased awareness in our fire departments, just like we've seen with cancer prevention. I mean, the takeaway from that really is drastic changes and shifts in the culture in the fire service is definitely possible. And I really hope to see that with mental health in the fire service. And a lot of departments out there are leading the way and doing a really great job with it. We can go to the next slide. I really like that line. How we bring people into an organization will set the stage for how they behave in that organization. Onboarding is critical. It's critical in all industries, all organizations. The volunteer world has changed a lot, especially in my area regarding to how we hire. But onboarding in volunteer halls is tough. We're often desperate for members, so it's tough to properly onboard members and get them kind of well established and understanding what we're trying to work towards. Regarding mental health, how we onboard sets that initial expectation from the organization, but it also what that new firefighter, it sets what that new firefighter can expect from the organization. So what we need from the firefighter and what the firefighter needs from us as an organization. If we onboard well, we can be developing firefighters with significantly reduced stigma around mental health. Things we talked about before, like consistent training, consistent resources, leaders in that organization that they can turn to for help. In 5 to 8 years, members can basically be in this position after being onboarded properly, to have a real awareness of mental health and be mentors for the new members coming up, really building on a foundation of mental wellness. In the volunteer world, 5 to 8 years is like the turnover time of a full department practically. The majority of those members will have changed. So in 5 to 8 years, you can have an entirely different culture in your fire department. To kind of sum up onboarding, with great onboarding, we can develop a group of firefighters who are going to be leaders in mental health in our organizations for like many years to come. The next slide. Families. When we think of our families, they support us, but how are they supporting us if we're not giving them the tools to support us? We all know our firefighters and coworkers pretty well, but I guarantee their families know them better. Spouses are in a fantastic position to see when trauma isn't being processed properly early on, but they also have to have the skills to know what to look for. They need to be armed with some knowledge, some resources, to know a little bit about mental health. That's how they can really support our firefighters when they come home from bad calls or coming up off shift. Training is also really important for families or spouses when they're feeling that strain from the firefighter's job, and it's not related to that firefighter having a hard time, but them. So maybe it's the shift pattern that's really not working. It's the traumatic stories that they keep hearing. The late night call outs in the volunteer world can be really tough. If we give families some training, they can learn to protect themselves, develop some skills in managing stress, and seek help from department resources if those are shared and provided. In Dashwood, it's something that we've worked really hard for. I'll talk a little later about what we're doing to support those families and encourage them to be a part of our department and our firefighters' well-being from a mental standpoint. Another thing kind of with that, families can become burnt out even if the firefighter isn't. The firefighter can be great, and we don't see that the family at home is really struggling with what they're doing. We can go on the next slide here. The 3 pillars of mental health support. These are really, really good. I kind of overseen a few different departments and kind of looking at what they're doing, and the 3 core pieces to really positive mental health support for membership is training, environment, resources, and support. So the training, consistent training for all your members like we've talked about, the environment like that training officer provided for his member, and like changing that culture so that the environment is more open so people can reach out for help and talk about what's going on with them, and backing both those up with resources and supports, higher levels of support. We're not clinicians, well, most of us aren't, and we're not going to be the ones that are going to be fixing these problems and helping these firefighters get through the brunt of what they're going through, but we have to be able to forward them and support their journey. An example of a department that does it really, really well is Salt Spring Island Fire. I went there, I think it was last year, to actually take their Resilient Minds training, and they've all done it. So every single one of their members has done that training. So that's the first pillar right there. They also have mandated counseling. So every member in their department, basically within a year, has to or is expected to go to 2 different counseling sessions. What that does is it takes the fear around counseling out of it. If everyone's going to counseling, counseling isn't scary. It's just like the news. So you'll hear conversations around the hall like, oh, you went and saw that counselor? How did you like them? The person I saw, I didn't like. Oh, well, who did you see? And then also the sharing of those skills that they learn in counseling. It's been great for them for shifting their culture. Debriefing and tailboards. They do a lot of that, and their CISM team is super active. The people that they have in their department are leaders in mental health. A couple of them are so approachable. Just being there for that course, I knew immediately that some of those members there, if you walked up and were having a rough day, they were going to stop whatever they were doing and focus on you. You were the most important thing for them right then. And so they have that training, they've developed that environment, and they have the resources with that counseling. They pay for counseling for their members, so members don't feel like they're left out to dry. We can go on to the next slide. That was a bit of an example of a department that's doing it really well, Salt Spring. But what Dashwood's doing, what we've been doing over the last few years, it's shifted a lot. It's policy now that every recruit firefighter, before they get a pager, must attend at least one counseling session. Now it could be through our MFAP, which is basically an EAP, or an extended through their extended benefits plan, excuse me, or a family doctor. They have to review the DMR, which is the Dashwood Mental Resiliency booklet, with a senior officer, and we really hope that they bring their spouse. We recommend that highly. I'm actually doing one of those tomorrow and in the next week with our new recruits. We have a couple training nights a year on mental wellness. Typically, clinicians or some subject matter expert comes in, gives a presentation, offers some information for our members that may be new or refreshing, new techniques, and again, bringing the spouses in, making them a part of what we're working on as mental health as a whole in our department. We also have annual firefighter physicals, which include mental wellness questionnaires. Basically, it's mainly for physical health, but it does give our firefighters an opportunity to chat with a doctor, maybe ask them what's going on with them or update them, things like that, about mental health. We go to the next slide. It's a little bit more of what Dashwood is doing. We have mandatory tailboard debriefings, which is new for us. I have to say, sometimes I forget, and it's something I'm really working on. But this has to happen at the scene or at the hall before those members leave. We're working on getting 5 questions that officers can ask that are a couple that are kind of tactical, like what did we do real well, what can we improve on, kind of a little overview of it, but then also going into how are you feeling after that? Is there something that you can't shake from your mind from that call? And then it gives the officers a chance to kind of gauge their reaction and go, okay, well, I definitely need to follow up with this firefighter. Something's not being processed right there. So that's been something that's new. Our chief has been so great with providing resources. We have a members and family assistance plan, extended medical and dental benefits. We were actually one of the first volunteer halls in Western Canada to get extended medical benefits, which is amazing. There's a few more resources there, but one thing that I know we're kind of struggling with is our CISM. We don't have a CISM team, and our nearest CISM team that we could call is probably an hour or so away. We don't know anyone on it really, so they don't get called when they maybe should. So we've been working to develop a regional team, and hopefully we get that in the works within the next year or so. That will kind of have standardized training. It'll be local, so rapid deployment. We won't be waiting a long time to have someone come in, and those crews will be familiar. That team that comes in will be from our mutual aid partners. So building trust in that is a really big part of that. So we can move to the next slide. So some people going on about, oh, that sounds expensive. What we're doing, some of it isn't cheap for sure, but what's the cost of inaction on mental health? What's that costing our organizations? Retention of crews, that's big in volunteer. I mean, when we lose crews, we lose a ton of money that we've put into them in training. We have to retrain new people to fill those spots, and that's not free, and it's not. It takes a lot of time. For career, time off, overtime, things like that, it adds up, and it can put a strain on certain organizations for sure. At the very end, I mean, the last thing we want to see is suicide, but that can be the ultimate cost of inaction on mental health. And that can be in any organization, anywhere. But the fire service, we have to be even more aware of that. But supporting our crews and our members, it doesn't have to be a big ticket item. A lot of the supports that we have are fairly reasonable, and not something that is going to cost you a huge amount of your budget, and also take time for your members to adopt. We can move on to the next slide here. So developing a mental resiliency toolbox. We all know different ways to pull a hose, different ways to kind of do the skills that we do on a fire ground, but how many mental resilience techniques do you or your crews know? I mean, this is a tough question. Before a couple years ago, it was like a mental what, a who? So expanding our toolbox, looking at what we can do to cope with the stresses that we have on the fire grounds and afterwards. We can go to the next slide. I think I'm running low on time here. So 3 breathing techniques, box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing. Will both of those are great. Box breathing was developed by the US military, and 4-7-8 breathing, it's amazing for calming yourself down. A lot of people use it before bed. I have before, and it's definitely helped. Tactical breathing, another easy one just to do sitting in your car or just before you go into work or sitting at your desk. Great options. We can go to the next slide. Some grounding exercises. I encourage you to Google grounding exercises. There's a lot of great ones. Kind of getting outside of your body and being, or into your body, pardon me, and being grounded in the moment and in the present. Your senses are really what bring you into the moment. So we can go to the next slide. The big scary F word, feelings. This is so important. Share your feelings. People don't want to. They're like, feelings? Heck no, I don't want to deal with that. Nope, put that down. I know myself, I've struggled with it a lot, but it's not weak to speak up, and we need to be talking with each other. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable is manageable. This is a quote from actually the movie that Tom Hanks did about Mr. Rogers. It's a quote from him, and it really talks about how if we're experiencing it, we can talk about it. And if we can talk about it, we can really manage what we're feeling and deal with that, whether it's hard or a challenge for us. It's things that we can work through together is preferably. We can go to the last slide on this section here. So just the mental resilience toolbox, it's not just a few techniques. It's also healthy lifestyles, eating healthy, getting physical activity, getting proper sleep. So I encourage you to kind of look that up on the internet, do some research to see what else you can find. We can go to the next slide. Some closing thoughts. Mental health is everyone's responsibility, whether it's in your day job doing construction like for me, whether it's in the fire service, everyone can make a difference. We can push for change in our organization. Develop those skills, work on them, practice them. If you're not using them, you're going to lose them. Be kind and patient to others. We don't know what someone else is going through. We don't know what kind of calls they've been on recently. And the more we can be patient, the better it is. And don't forget to share the feelings, the scary F words. We can go to the last slide. So this is kind of right after this, we can go into some questions, but I have a question and a challenge for you guys. First off, the question, what steps can you take to reduce the stigma around mental health and foster a safer environment within your organization? Are there things that you can do right now, tomorrow, to change that culture? And the challenge, I challenge you all for the next 7 days, 2 to 5 minutes a day for yourself. Just take 2 to 5 minutes. It's not much. Develop that mental resilience toolbox. Try the things out that I've talked about here, and hopefully you find something you like. At the end of those 7 days, ask yourself, what have I noticed? Are you feeling less stressed? Are you feeling less angry? Did you notice anything? So we can go to the last slide there. That's all I have there at the end there. Sorry, I had to rush a bit, but thank you guys for your time. Reach out with questions. I have my email there. You can send me an email if you're interested. Share what your department's doing, what's working, what's not. If you have any questions that way, welcome. I welcome them. And then I think Laura is going to look at questions in the chat there for me.
Yes, I am. I have a comment to pass along to you.
Okay.
First, one I definitely agree with. Chief Arjuna George, I would like to pass along an excellent job, Lieutenant, and thank you. So
That's the Salt Spring Island chief. He's been a
Yeah.
real leader over there. It's been really great to see what he's been working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure is. All right, here's a question for you. Have you or your department approached WorkSafe BC to assist in delivering the course you referred to from Salt Spring? Resilient Minds, was it approved by WorkSafe as a course for BC?
So Resilient Minds is through the Canadian Mental Health Association, and it was developed in association with Vancouver firefighters. I think the gentleman's name is Doug Fraser. Don't quote me on that, but some of the firefighters there worked with the CMHA to develop this program for firefighters. I'm not sure if it's approved by WorkSafe. I believe it's separate from them under the helm of the Canadian Mental Health Association. But when I first tried to take it, it was really hard because it was an expensive course. So one of the best ways to get that to people is through train the trainer courses. So you have a couple of your members go out and they take the class, and then they can teach it to the membership, which is kind of what Salt Spring has done. I know that they've actually gotten approval to take it to Alberta and across Canada now. And there was talk. I'm talking with one of the ladies from the CMHA about pairing this booklet with it, so everyone can walk away with a booklet that's not identical to the Dashwood one, but a generic one that might be able to kind of help departments think about where they can take it themselves, or just a generic one that can just be a resource for their membership, different information to take home with them.
Okay. I have another couple comments to pass along and another question. So Bruce McDonald would like to say, excellent session.
Awesome, thank you.
Good compliments coming. And Nick asked, oh my goodness, I hope I don't butcher this last name. Akiavati, thank you.
Yeah, that's my chief.
That's a tough one. I thought so by the comments. Yeah. Nice work, Lieutenant, proud chief.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief.
For sure. It's a great presentation. So one question we can add in here is, have you faced, like, what kind of resistance did you face in your department regarding, you know, these changes in the mental health policies?
For sure. First off, from the chief, none. He's backed us the whole way. At the beginning, even sending me to courses before it was really kind of in the forefront of what we were doing. It's like, yeah, try that course, see if it works for you, and bring back something with you. That's something that he's always saying. Make sure if you go on a course, you're bringing something back. So I definitely did that with the Resilient Minds course. But in regards to the culture of the fire department, I think everyone's been really supportive of this development of this booklet, and they've seen as it's gone along. I know our use of our benefits has gone up a lot. Our use of our EAP has gone up a lot, and I think that speaks to people are getting more comfortable. There's been a few times I've mentioned, oh, I went to counseling the other day, and everyone's like, whoa, what? What are we talking about now? And so sharing those feelings and catching people off guard. And there's been a few times now where I've had conversations with our members about how their counseling sessions have gone, and it's completely been normalized. It's been really great to see it kind of this evolution through the department. And it's been really led from the top. I mean, the board supporting our chief, and our chief supporting us with the OHS committee. It's been really great to be a part of.
I have a question about the presentation being shared and about sharing the pamphlet. So we should, all of the content from this event will be recorded and put online. So to answer that question, you can come back and view this anytime. And Braden, maybe I'm going to suggest to Jennifer Delaney's asking the question about the pamphlet, maybe she can contact you directly.
Yeah, definitely. Send me an email if you're looking for more information on it, what we're doing, any more questions for sure. Send them my way. I'm happy to answer them.
A question, I'm a clinical psychologist in Ontario. I love the idea of this book for members. Is there any chance we can use some of the material and tailor it to our community? I'm the lead psychologist for a local fire hall here, and it would be so helpful. So I'm probably going to again suggest maybe they reach out directly.
Totally, that's amazing.
Lara Sig, more names I'm going to have trouble. Sigurdsson, yeah. Anyway, please, reach out to.
For sure.
McKenna directly.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, pairing a psychologist with the fire department in that regard, or a clinician. Some kind of partnership can be really beneficial too. So I'd love to hear more from her about what they were doing over there.
Perfect. So your contact information will be part of the package that is put up online as well. So you'll be able to follow up with Braden that way.
Sorry.
Have you noted any differences between acceptance and resistance between generations?
Totally. We've had a few junior firefighters come into the fire department, and they've been really open to kind of talking about it and sharing with me. Whereas older members who have come from more industry work, maybe heavy machinery, things like that, where it's kind of been that culture for a long, long time, it's really tough to change that. But I think working on the people that are willing to change right away, who are looking like, oh yeah, no, this could help me. I think it's important to start with who you're going to have a higher chance of success with, breaking that stigma down. And pretty soon, before you know it, those people are going to want to talk. They're going to be like, oh man, this one time, and start sharing stories of tough times that they've had that they've never shared before. So there definitely is a generational piece there, and being aware that depending on who you're talking to, our language is really important.
Absolutely. All right. I think that we can wrap for questions. But again, if anyone wants to follow up with Braden, you can take note of the contact information now, or this presentation will be, I believe, loaded back up on our virtual summit page, and you'll be able to find it after the event. So I'd of course like to thank you for that wonderful presentation and for continuing the mental health conversation. It's really so important to keep this topic front and center. And
Definitely.
Firefighting in Canada has made a donation to the Canadian Fallen Firefighters Foundation on your behalf as a thank you for your time that you've volunteered generously today.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I really appreciate that, and thanks for the opportunity to share today. It's been quite a journey to take the booklet to where it is and be able to share it with more people, and yeah, push the cause forward. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. Our pleasure.